Hey, we're excited to have Neal Huntington on the show, former general manager of the Pirates, current special assistant to the president of baseball ops and GM for the Cleveland Guardians. Neal, great to have you on. Thank you for the time. How you doing? And I like the little logo there.
Doing great. Thanks so much, Scott, Todd, and Eric for having me on the show. Eric, it's been a long time, man.
It has been a long time, and for everybody who doesn't know, Neal fired me twice.
What?
So, but I have to bring the negative up. I supped, and the positive part was he actually gave me my first chance in the big leagues, and without that, hey, never know if I would have ever made the big leagues and gotten to know Todd Frazier.
Hey now.
That's good. I like that. All right, Neal. So I want to start first with your current role with the Guardians, and if you can, give us a little insight on what they've been up to lately. Of course, just signed Paul Sewald, and they're coming off in ALCS where they were making a lot of Yankee fans pretty damn nervous.
Yeah, it's a fascinating club in that our starting pitching was probably the biggest challenge, and that's not typically something that gets you to the postseason. But our manager, our staff, our players played so hard every out of every game, and our bullpen gave us a chance to get back into games, and our starting pitching was just good enough. Our offense found a way to score runs. Um, this off season has been about trying to move some things around to create some financial flexibility down the road, while also trying to add to the good core that's here with the young group that's coming behind it. And it's always a challenge to add, move laterally, and in some cases subtract while still trying to move forward.
I want to ask you a question right now with all the signings going on the East Coast and West Coast. The Midwest and right in the center of America here. Are you guys happy about that? You said because all these big names are going right and left of you guys, and it doesn't seem like they're coming in the middle. I got to feel like you're some sort of happy, I would assume.
Well, the reality is that the big money is always going to be what plays in the big markets. And so that's where your primary free agents, your premium free agents, they tend to end up in the bigger markets. And that's where the smaller markets tend to play in that middle tier and that next tier. And again, walking that fine line between this year and next year and 2 years, 3 years from now, adding Carlos Santana, adding Paul Sewald are a couple of veterans with a ton of experience. They're going to help our young players continue to grow. And these are the challenges that the small markets do face.
Can you tell me a little bit about the hiring process, not only for coaches, but getting players in? Because I've played for the Pirates, where you were the GM. I've played for the Guardians. They were the Indians at the time. Incredible, incredible people. How much is that important in these small markets?
Crucial, Eric. The most major league teams are playing from a similar playbook. Every major league team has the same resource foundation due to the national television contracts and the national revenue. Where it becomes very different is as you start to get into local revenues, and that's where one club may have 4, 5, 6, 8 times the local revenues that a small market does. So when you're playing from the same playbook, you have the same expense foundation in player development and scouting and analytics and just running a baseball organization. Everybody has that same, but for the small markets, that percentage of total of money available is much larger than it is for the large markets. And that's essentially where your differences in payrolls come from, is local revenues. So as you look at how do we find an advantage in these small markets, we believe it's our processes and our people. And the process has become exhaustive. The recruiting that goes on in free agency, the planning that goes through identifying how we think we can help a free agent is exhaustive. The recruiting of staff, the continual sourcing of potential staff members for somewhere down the road, it's never ending. And then once you get into that hiring process, it is absolutely crucial that we get it right. And Cleveland's more exhaustive in terms of the vetting process and the interview process of anybody I've ever seen. And I think the proof is in the pudding with the quality that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff bring to this organization. Steve Vogt hit the ground running despite being a rookie manager and following a Hall of Famer. Had a great staff around him, and they just, man, they were unbelievable this year, and it was so much fun to watch them work, and look forward to this year and future years.
how do you sit there and feel about your tenure as a Pirates GM? Because you took an organization that was it 17 losing seasons, and then rattled off what was built with a minor league organization that your crew built. You, Kyle Stark, I'm forgetting people now. Jim Benedict that were in the minor leagues, and you created that small dynasty for a city that is craving it. How do you feel about your tenure there, and looking back on now what they've done since?
So the challenge to that is obviously it's not good enough because I'm now sitting here with the Guardians logo on my chest and was asked to not come back to Pittsburgh. But that said, I am proud of a lot of what we did. We took over a situation that a friend of mine, after I took the job, told me I would have been better taking an expansion club. And I asked him why he didn't tell me that before I took the job. But we brought in people that were committed to something bigger than themselves. We brought in people that wanted to do something the right way. And we had the 3-year rebuild, and people forget that in year 4, we were competitive deep into August and then had an abysmal September. We did the same thing in year 5. And then year 6 is 2013. And one of the most special moments I think I'll ever experience professionally was the wild card game in Pittsburgh, and had a 3-year run where I think we had the second or third best record in baseball. The problem is the Cardinals were one of the teams that were ahead of us, and we just couldn't find our way around them. Rolled things out there in 16, 17. It didn't work. So we shifted gears, tried to shift things up, and traded some players nearing the end of their time under contract in Pittsburgh, and it didn't work. And we tried to retool without rebuilding, and it didn't work, and that's why I'm sitting here today. But incredibly proud of the people. Kyle Stark was phenomenal. Kevin Graves as an assistant GM is tremendous, and I hope gets an opportunity as a GM someday. Greg Smith and Joe Delicari brought in a ton of good players in our scouting system, our player development staff, our major league coaches. Clint Hurdle was so great to work with. And worked so hard to get the most out of the people that were around him. Again, I wished we had found a way to win more games, certainly in October, but over the course of the years, and it didn't end well. But I am incredibly proud of a lot of the things that we did there.
I mean, you glossed over the fact that you guys built a brand new facility down in the Dominican for Dominican players to continue to grow that pipeline. But there was a story out there about how you had asked for some money from Bob Nutting, and he said no, and all this stuff. During that time, to make that jump, you said about passing the Cardinals. Was there ever a dollar figure in your mind, or a player that cost a certain dollar figure that would have been like, man, you know what? If we had this person to pair with Garrett Cole, to pair with a young Jamison Tyone, and we could have gone and gotten him, probably would have costed more than the largest free agent contract at $19 million that any Pirate has ever gotten. Do you know what that dollar amount would be? Because I know Pirate fans would love to know how close they are or were or could be to winning a championship in that city.
So the reality, it's a great question. The reality is we never allowed ourselves those thoughts, those conversations at the time. We worked within the parameters that our market allowed, that our ownership allowed, and we worked to do the absolute best that we could. We tried to take some chances. It didn't always work. Sometimes it worked out great. We tried to maximize the dollars that we were applying through good scouting, good coaching, good development. And again, in a lot of cases it worked. In some cases it didn't. To sit in that bottom 10 in payroll every single year, as I look back on it, it is tough. Bottom 5 for the majority of our time there. At the same time, I look at what Chris and Mike are accomplishing here in Cleveland, and they've accomplished in Eric, and before him, Andrew down in Tampa. And it is possible. It's just the margin for error is so much smaller. The hard reality, and no fan wants to hear this, the hard reality is market size is real. As we talked about earlier, the difference in revenues, meaning the difference in payroll, it's real. It's not a facade. There are some organizations that in a given year or a given sequence of years, when they think they have a window, they'll deficit spend. But most of these owners are owners because they were good business people and good business people tend not to like to lose money on a consistent basis. And so the owners spend what the market allows, what the revenues allow. Ideally, a front office has the freedom to move some money around as they see fit, and that's we were able to do that in Pittsburgh. Chris and Mike and are able to do that here, and it looks like Eric is able to do that down in Tampa Bay, and that's crucial to be able to push some more in some years and maybe reallocate it in others. But everybody wants spending to be the answer. But this is a business. No one likes to hear that. No fans want to hear that, but it is a business. And typically 28 owners, 27 owners operate as if it's a business. Sometimes you have one or two or three that'll go out and deficit spend in a certain period of time. And that is the harsh reality.
Yeah, you can deficit spend because the franchise value skyrockets. We also don't have access to books. So especially the case in Pittsburgh gets really tough, Neal, because most people look at it and say, how am I supposed to feel bad for the ownership group that can't spend $20 million in free agency? I don't believe that. I know fans don't believe that. And if that's truly the case, most people say then someone else should be owning the team, because there definitely are people that would take over a team like that. Do you commiserate with fans in a case like that? Do you feel like Pittsburgh can't even spend $20 million on a long-term contract on a player in free agency at this point in the game with the revenues that even the Pirates have?
So, of course, Scott, I understand the frustration where teams are choosing not to spend. The equity in the club is a bit of a false argument. It's the same as home equity. You only get it if you loan, if you take out a loan, or if you sell the club. So most owners don't intend to sell. Some that do are the ones that tend to deficit spend because they want to take a run at it before they sell the club. And you're right. It's tough to feel sorry for billionaires that are saying they can't spend. I definitely understand that. And again, ideally, there would be every owner that would be willing to deficit spend for a sequence of years when they feel like their window is open. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in the industry. The other sports typically don't deficit spend because they don't need to, because player X costs a percentage of their payroll, and that's the difference between a player choosing to play in Boston, Chicago, or Pittsburgh, or Cleveland. But in Major League Baseball, when a player costs 10% of Cleveland's payroll, that's a $10 million player. When he costs 10% of a large market team's payroll, that's $25 to $30 to $35 million player. And that does make it very, very different. I definitely understand why fans get frustrated because they see billionaires that don't spend. They're business people, and business people run businesses, and they don't run businesses to lose money on a consistent basis. Ideally, some are willing to do it on a short-term basis. My expectation and my assumption, watching from a distance here years ago, is that the Dolans here in Cleveland have been willing to do that. As I've looked at their payroll numbers compared to other small markets, and my first go around with Cleveland, I know they deficit spent at times, but that's not a way to run a business on a consistent basis.
That's awesome to hear about Cleveland, and your insight is awesome because you were in those meetings. Is there a situation where if we hear salary cap, we have a soft salary cap with the threshold, the luxury tax threshold. Because you've seen these numbers, if there is a floor put in, do you feel like some of these teams will have to sell their team because of the fact that now they're needing to spend an extra $70 million because of where the floor is put, because of where the ceiling is, just like other leagues?
So the way the other leagues make it work, Eric, is just a lot more revenue sharing. The reason Green Bay can compete with New England and the Los Angeles teams is there's a lot more revenue sharing. So that is a big obstacle. I think from the ownership side is more revenue sharing. But without revenue sharing, I think it would be extremely difficult to find to make it work on a team side without significant revenue sharing if there is a salary floor, which if there's going to be a salary cap, I certainly understand why there would be the expectation of a salary floor, but there would need to be significant shift in revenue sharing as is done in the other sports.
We've heard your name mentioned in so many jobs. Good thing you didn't take the Giants job because Buster just came in and just was like, well, I'm done playing, so I'll go and do that now. So that's unfair. That's like me coming in and being like, Buster, I'm going to catch now. And Buster's like, oh, actually, I'm just going to keep catching. So he would have taken your job. Your name's been bantered around with other teams. What's next for you? What is your, I don't want to say goal because I know your mindset is not necessarily, I need this job because you see the fact that somebody has that job already and you're not looking to poach somebody's job. But what is your goal in the game as you currently sit here in 2025?
So I took the Pirates job not to become a GM. I took the Pirates job to help people achieve their personal and professional goals and to create lifelong positive memories for our fans. I'm not quite in that same realm now, but I can give back to young staff and young executives and mentor. I'm out and about evaluating. I saw a ton of players for the draft. I see our minor league system. I share my thoughts with Chris and Mike and Matt Foreman, the tremendous assistant GM. If the right opportunity were to present itself to lead a baseball operations department again with the right group in charge and the right ownership group, I would love to take another run and learn from the lessons. If it doesn't, I'm in a really good spot with the Cleveland Guardians, and I love this group. And if something else pops up in between, I'm absolutely open to it. I just want to continue to try to help people.
What the Dodgers are doing right now is incredible. Signing all these guys, not worried about money, getting after it, doing what they have to do. What do you think about this? And have you ever seen anything like this in your career with all the big time guys that they're signing and the money that they are giving out?
No, you go back to the criticism that people used to levy on the Yankees, and the Dodgers are dwarfing that. They're running circles around what was done back in the day. It feels like anyway, and again, a credit to them. They figured out a way to make the finances work. I have no idea if their deficit spending or if their revenues are just this strong that they're able to do this. And you look at the other leagues, and there are teams in huge markets that make huge profits. There are teams in smaller markets that some years make profits, some years don't. And I'm never going to criticize an owner or a front office for doing what they are able to and allowed to do. And it seems tough for the game when teams are talking about signing a player to play a marquee role for them, and he goes to Los Angeles and he's going to be the fourth or fifth best at his role. But we're here to win championships. It's what we sign up for. We recognize it doesn't change our motivation at the end of the day. Our on-field goal is to win championships. And if it gets a little tougher, it gets a little tougher, and we're going to show up and compete every day.
Neal, I just want to do a side-by-side since you spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, but now you've been gone for a while, and now you've spent a good chunk of time with Cleveland. Why do you think Cleveland has more success recently as an organization versus Pittsburgh, even since you left? I know you're not there, but they both live in central divisions where it's sure these teams have to kind of scrap and claw with payroll, but they're in a similar enough range to other teams. So this is partially for Pittsburgh fans. Like, why can't we be good after going through a whole teardown and starting back up? And Cleveland fans saying, what are we doing so well that we're able to put together a team like this?
So what makes Cleveland so special and Tampa so special is that they haven't had to go through a teardown and rebuild. If you look at Cleveland's records over the past 10, 15 years, the one-loss record is just incredible for the resources, and Tampa similarly. In Pittsburgh, we tore it down when we got there. We worked really hard not to have to tear it down. The biggest difference between Pittsburgh and Cleveland goes back to like 2013 to 2019, and Cleveland had Chris Antonetti and Pittsburgh had me. And I say that in all seriousness, that's how good this front office is they are a difference maker front office. in their people and their processes and how they apply those things. The hard part is if you would ask people if after year 3 in Pittsburgh, if I was going to last to year 6, 90% of the fans would have said, God, I hope not. But for year 4, year 5, we started to show signs. Year 6, we made the postseason. This has been and his front office's 6th year. They've got great young pitching over there. How they find enough offense is going to be something that they need to do. I respect Derek Shelton a lot. I'm rooting for them. The fans of Pittsburgh are passionate. That passion turns to venom when they lose too much, whether it's the Pirates, the Penguins, or the Steelers. We all feel it. We all felt it back in the day. And again, that's the reality. So that margin for error we talked about earlier is really small. And if you swing and miss, sometimes you don't get that second swing, or sometimes that it just causes too much damage. And that's the hard part of these small markets, and that's where Chris and Mike here in Cleveland with Terry and now Voter, they've just found a way to maintain that competitive edge, to maintain the ability to retain really good players, but have enough depth that when they get injured, they're able to somehow survive. And when they have an off year, it's not 5 off years, and it's remarkable what they do here. The partnerships, the emphasis on growth and development, both in the front office with our coaches, and with our players is special, and it's like no place I've ever seen before.
I had a story. It would take too long about getting my first minor league contract with the Pirates. I don't think you were a part of it. It was more Kyle Stark, so I'll tell that story on the show another time. But I want you to go to 2010, and I know you made a ton of player moves. I was told in 2018 or 19 by one of the coaches that you had in your room there. There's a lot of coaches at the end of spring training. I was told that I was voted, of the 6 or 8 people, majority vote had me making the team out of spring training, but I was not on the 40-man roster. Can you confirm or deny that you were one of the people with John Russell that said I should not make the team out of spring training?
Well, since you didn't make the team, obviously I was a part of that, Eric, so you can hate me for that. I remember bringing you into camp, and I don't know if you remember this, and I'm sorry to take time that we don't have, but when we sat down for our entrance meeting at the beginning of spring training, we had signed you, I think it was January, late January. You were coming out of Toronto. You'd had a good year in AA. You were older. And we had signed you, in all candor, to be an organizational catcher, to go to AAA, to lead a staff, to catch, throw, to game call, and help our young players mature. And when we talked about that in spring training, I remember you at the end of the meeting looking me dead in the eye and saying, I'm just not sure why you wouldn't want a guy who can do all those things and hit 20 bombs. So keep me in mind. And that's how you ended our meeting at the end of spring training when you joined us.
Love that.
I love that. It is all true story, except for the fact that Kyle Stark had actually said in the meeting, you are going to go to AA, but Joe Kerrigan spoke up for me, and I ended up being the AAA backup behind Robinson Diaz, because you had Miguel Perez, who now Miggy's the AAA manager of the Indianapolis Indians. But at part of that meeting, Kyle Stark said, if before we release you halfway through the year, we would love to see if you could pitch. So I got hired, and you were already thinking about how to fire me or hire me on as a coach. So it was one of those mixed meetings.
Two additions to that, Eric. One, we actually talked about and called you Coach Kratzs as we signed you, because we thought you were going to be an outstanding manager someday. So we were signing you in part to come learn our culture, come add to our culture, but then hopefully be a part of leading our culture when your time was done. You went to AAA and were too good. You played your way to the major leagues. Unfortunately, we didn't see that same result in the major leagues. And we moved on from you mistakenly, because you went out and had a heck of a major league career, Eric, and my hat's off to you. But so not only did we think we might ask you to pitch, we called you Coach Kratzs because we hoped you were going to lead our system and be a really good manager, maybe at the major league level, but certainly in the minor leagues for us, if you hadn't gone out and played so well.
It's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. Getting fired, getting hired, and pushing your way through.
And he's still Coach Kratz now with Foul Territory.
And you're right. He is a good manager for his son's high school team, too.
That's right. Well, Neal, thank you so much for joining us and providing all the insight. Really helpful for us. We love talking to front office people. So appreciate the time, and we'll see you in spring training out in Arizona.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, guys. I enjoyed it.
Appreciate you. Yeah, here too. Neal Huntington, currently in the front office for Cleveland, formerly with Pittsburgh.